disrupted.
America that I fought for.
Thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. It's been a fantastic day so far. So I have to mention about COVID again, and I don't want to because every time I mention about COVID, it just further angers me at the deception, the trail of what the last few years has been and what continues to be. But it's still this huge revelating story, and it is like the more information we have on this, the better to understand just how deceptive the whole scheme this was on a global factor, and still continues to be, because they're still advocating for booster shots. I think we're at like number 10 that they're trying to advocate people for COVID boosters and vaccines, which are very safe and effective and stop transmission. They work so well that you need at least 10 of them to keep going. That's how well they work, apparently. But I have to, the reason I bring this up is because of this video that I'm about to show you here of a news report. This is a show called Full Measure, and they're going to highlight a story about kids when it comes to COVID. Now, as many people are aware, we exposed on this channel, and we've shown people before that children were at very low risk. Very, very, very low risk. In fact, it was such a low risk that they couldn't even calculate it to a proper whole number. That is how significantly low children are when it came to catching COVID. They were more susceptible to catching harmful influenza than COVID-19. But yet we had so much protocols. We still have so many people that are advocating for young children that did not need this, that are actually getting far worse immune disorders and adverse side effects to getting injected than previously. And this is one of these cases. And again, it barges me that I have to keep bringing this up, but it's so important to bring this information. It breaks my heart even further just to show how deceptive the world really is. And it's just absolutely chaotic. It still continues to this day. Look at this.
Florida Surgeon General recently called for a halt in COVID vaccines due to safety questions, while the federal government continues to heavily promote them for adults and kids alike. Today, we begin with a little-told story about COVID vaccine injuries. It's the story of Maddie, one of the children who took part in Pfizer's vaccine study on children. It's a remarkable account of what happened when Maddie got very, very sick, leading to accusations that Pfizer, the FDA, and the study leaders tried to bury her case.
All three of my kids were in the Pfizer clinical trial for 12 to 15-year-olds at Cincinnati Children's.
In summer of 2020, Stephanie DeGarry and her family learned an important clinical trial was about to be launched at nearby Cincinnati Children's Hospital. It would test Pfizer's experimental COVID-19 vaccine on 12 to 15-year-olds to see if it was safe and effective. The DeGarrys, firmly pro-vaccine, didn't hesitate to let their children take part. Among three siblings, 12-year-old Maddie alone was chosen to get 2 doses of Pfizer's vaccine rather than a harmless placebo. It proved a fateful and debilitating roll of the dice.
Her second dose was January 20th of 2021. And that was my son's 16th birthday, literally the day. I have a picture of the three of them on that day. That night, in the middle of the night, that's when it all started. So let's just say 12 hours after her second dose.
What kinds of things did she wake up with, or was she suffering?
She just came in and asked if she could sleep in our bedroom, which was not normal. She said, "I don't feel right. Can I sleep in your room?" So she slept in between us, so very odd. And then in the morning, she ended up going to school just because she hates missing school, because then you have to make up the work. So by the time she came home from school, my husband called me at work and said, "Maddie's having some sort of reaction." She had what she described as electrical shocks going up and down her spine. She said she felt like her heart was being ripped out. So chest pain. She had severe abdominal pain. She was hunched over when she walked through the door. Her toes and her fingers were white, and they were like, when you touched them, they were ice cold and painful.
Did you think right away that this was probably a vaccine reaction?
100%. There was nothing wrong with her prior to that.
Before long, Maddie lost feeling in her legs. Here, she's scooting on the floor and using her hands to lift her legs. DeGarry says she was shocked when the lead study doctor offered no help. She found herself reluctantly following the advice of physicians who insisted Maddie's paralysis, seizures, passing out, all of it were caused by anxiety.
I'm embarrassed how much I was brainwashed and believed them. She did cognitive behavioral therapy, which is seeing a psychologist.
At what point did you think to yourself, I've tried what they said. I know my daughter's not suffering a psychological event?
I always had in the back of my mind, I knew that it wasn't. So when she was in her hospital stay in April, they treated her horribly. Like, they treated her like a crazy person. And at that point, I knew. Plus, she wasn't getting better.
Maddie was rushed to the ER 9 times. By the time she was hospitalized for the 3rd time, she had heart problems, seizures, was passing out, vomiting, unable to swallow, and was fed through a tube. She was in the hospital that time for a month and a half.
Hey, welcome back.
Studies are conducted to identify and investigate any health risks. Maddie's reaction was a giant red flag for Pfizer's vaccine. But the DeGarys say those involved seem more interested in blaming Maddie's illnesses on anything but the obvious culprit. While Maddie was fighting for her life, the FDA granted emergency use of Pfizer's vaccine for kids as young as age 12, based on the study Maddie took part in. In a press release, Pfizer reported its vaccine had a favorable safety profile observed across 6 months of safety follow-up data after the 2nd dose. No mention of what happened to Maddie. Parents across the country started rushing to get their children the heavily promoted shots.
You were super duper today, getting your COVID vaccine, Elmo.
Yeah, there was a little pinch, but it was okay.
I took a trip up there to the North Pole. I went there and I vaccinated Santa Claus myself.
It sounds like you have the sense that government / the drug company and study folks did not want to acknowledge this as a vaccine adverse event.
No, they did not.
And you feel they were not honest about the reporting of her case.
They left out a lot of information. They reported it as functional abdominal pain, so it's basically a stomach ache that you can't explain.
Again, I had to show this because of how devastating and it cannot be silenced out any longer. Just like the story we shared about Kayla Pollock of Ontario that's currently facing putting a lawsuit out against Moderna for her paralysis. This is devastating. This is and this is on children. These are young, vulnerable children that were pushed into this. And the worst part about that story is just like what happened to Kayla Pollock when they told her that it was all mental. It was they tried to, psychiatric analyze her and saying that her paralysis, that the reason she couldn't feel anything was all in her head. It was all anxiety. The worst part about that, and this is a trick done by big pharmaceuticals purposely, is that when they can use that, when they can use psychology as a basis for their argument, they can then psych the patient out by saying, hey, you need to take a bunch of, antidepressants. You need to take anti-anxiety medication, which are RSSIs. And those are dangerous. Those are dangerous depending on the consumption. And those are things that they don't tell you about. These are all they dose you with more medication to treat you from something that happened from a medication that they will not ever address to the patient. It is just a lie after a lie after a scam after a scam, and it's devastating. And it's devastating. And I hate to bring these up. I wish I could move on and not talk about COVID and talk about the devastation, but we're still dealing with the effects of it. We are never going to deal. We're not going to ever get away from the manufactured stunt that it was and how devastating it was from adverse side effects, from the lying, the betrayal, the corruption within politicians, and even just the pandemic itself, how it created mass influx of homelessness, opioid epidemics, just anxieties from young kids because they were deprived away from school, to businesses failing, small business shops that will never cease to exist. How was a cultivation for monopolies to further develop brick and mortar stores. Like, we are never going to get out of this. We are never going to get out of this. And I'm so desperate to show this information to people because they're just going to silence us out. This is on a random program that will never be featured on mainstream television because it's not brought to you by Pfizer. It's not brought to you by pharmaceutical giants that pretty much concepts all the media that you're watching on television and all the radio stations and all the print advertisements. Like, the big pharmaceuticals are the major advertisers that keep media afloat in the United States and particularly around the world. And they still continue to do this. They still continue to get away with this. Even if, Kayla does win the lawsuit or her family takes to court with this, big pharmaceuticals are just going to be like, it's just pennies to us. And then they're just going to go on to the next deception. Like, this is just such an unbelievable betrayal that I feel devastated. I feel heartbroken, but I need to address this. I have to address this because this will not, I don't want to get this silenced. And I'm sure that YouTube is going to probably demonetize or do something like this, which I'll tell you that this is just one person's perspective. I'm going to tell you it's very safe and effective, but you can decide for yourself. And here's just some more information on this that we've already previously showed, but I just want to highlight again that even New York Intelligencer pointed this out in 2021. They even reported this. And people still went along with this. The kids are all right. Why now is the time to rethink COVID safety protocols for children and everyone else? So that was based on the study that they showed that kids have a very, very, very low risk of contracting COVID. And the fact that we had to mandate children to get the vaccines, to get the jabs, to keep them away from school, deprive them from seeing their friends, deprive them from social relationships, deprive them from a proper education was just ludicrous. It was absolutely ludicrous and barbaric towards children. And even the New York Intelligencer reported on this. This is a mainstream publication openly stating that this is ridiculous and we need to get kids back into school. We need to get kids back into social interactions because depriving them away further longers them, and it's going to cause more damage for them physically and mentally as they continue to grow. But they're not going to listen to any of this because we have politicians, we have health experts that are brought to you by these horrible organizations. And if you even look further into, medical institutions, you look at how medical studies have been taught in school and how these people that are being taught to become doctors and nurses are brought to you by these horrible agencies, by, the big pharmaceutical giants. And that was brought to you by a guy by the name of John Rockefeller, who paved the way for instituting that these medical schools, instead of teaching them about organics and nature and how we could effectively change our life if we just change our lifestyle a bit, exercise more, get more vitamin D, focus on our vitamins, focus on building up our immunity so that when we do get sick or ill, we have a fighting chance against it. They're not teaching any of that anymore. They're just teaching future doctors and nurses to treat people with more pharmaceuticals, how to write more prescriptions. And that's all brought to you by John Rockefeller, who bought into the medical process and wanted to put people more through pharmaceuticals because it was more business for him. And this is what you get out of it. Theresa Tam, who is the National Health Advisor here in Canada, Theresa Tam recommends mask and updated COVID vaccines this fall. That's from last year. That's September 13th, 2023. Even now, as we're about to almost approach the summer of 2024, they're still saying this. They're still recommending young kids to get jabbed, to get boosters, because you don't know what's going to happen next. There's going to be another epidemic. You don't know what's going to happen, but we do know what's going to happen, and we could know what's happening if we were properly told the actual reports, if we actually had the information that was available to people, but they hid it away for so long. I wonder why that is. I wonder why pharmaceuticals that wanted us to trust their product had to hide away all the information for 75 plus years and had a barrage of lawyers protecting that data from harmful viewing, and why they had to do global-wide mass censorship. I wonder why that is. If it's so safe and effective and they want us to trust the product, wouldn't it be my obligation to read into that product so I could feel trusted that this organization preaches? Or is it all manufactured, corporate scam, and a sleaze psyops to manufacture on a global-wide scale to get into this pharmaceutical agenda? And just to continue on this madness, just recently, this is from Concerned Citizen, saying that the World Health Organization announcing that they're developing a bird flu vaccine. That's right, bird flu is back, ladies and gentlemen. That thing, that thing that happened, I think it was like 2005, that only lasted a month, is apparently back, folks. I don't know if people are making out with seagulls again, but ladies and gentlemen, bird flu makes an appearance again. And the World Health Organization is no doubt supporting the role of vaccines, because who else but the World Health Organization, brought to you by Bill Gates, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Bill Gates Foundation for vaccines, and the manufacturers that bring us these chemicals that get us into, jabs us into our bodies, are going to be the expertise when it comes to preventing these outbreaks, which, if you look into the outbreaks, could maybe resemble that these outbreaks are purposely being manufactured to bring us new treatments, which is kind of the point of the just blanked on the name. now I'm having brain fog. It's talking about COVID. Anthony Fauci was part of. Anthony Fauci was the gain and function king that created these harmful diseases, and there's a whole documentary on this. Mass manufactured these harmful pathogens that leaked out to people and injected people with these harmful pathogens to then effectively create a vaccine so they can double the money in manufacturing and curing people of said disease. But here's the World Health Organization on bird flu.
And available treatment or control measures. WHO recommends countries strengthen surveillance in settings where humans and farmed or wild animals interact. WHO is also continuing to engage with manufacturers to make sure that, if needed, supplies of vaccines and antivirals would be available for global use.
So in order to prevent us from bird flu, instead of informing people what exactly bird flu is, because I don't even know what it is. I know we had it once before, and I I never saw people affected, or I don't know anything about it. I was probably like 10 or 11 at that point. Instead of informing people about it, they're just going to say, you got to strengthen your boots, you got to strengthen the surveillance, and you got to tell manufacturers to invest highly into pharmaceuticals. We need to get injections out now, warp speed. That's what the World Health Organization is at this point. Just like NATO. They're not helping countries. They're not assisting in peacekeeping. These are just governmental bodies, not NGOs, that are responsible for pushing the agendas of large corporations, which is what fascism is. And this is an example of medical tyrannical fascism. When you have the World Health Organization completely captured by psychotic narcissists like Bill Gates and mass manufacturers of big pharmaceuticals, chemicals that are getting injected into us, and they push this agenda through the World Health Organization for the best interests of communities, that we have to do mass surveillance again, continue it on, and inject and get manufacturers to create these poisons so we can inject you at some point for a virus that we don't fully understand and will never fully understand if we're not properly informed. Which is why I am showing you all this, not to skepticize on the vaccine process, not to say, because I know there's so many people out there that are going, well, what about polio? Polio was an effective vaccine. Are you anti-vax? I am just informing people to make a smart decision. I am saying that we need to provide information to people, and it really comes down to you. You as a patient have the ultimate decision of what you want to do with your health. That should be the standard for every single person. And no one, not a single person on earth, should objectify to that. My body, my choice. That used to be a motto that I fully agreed with, but that's no longer. They no longer preach that. They no longer stand by that, because COVID happened. Now it's, my body, their choice. It's their decision to tell you what to inject yourself with. It's their decision to tell you what, food you should buy. It's their decision to tell you exactly. And what their decision is to do everything the corporation tells them to do. And when they're getting their insight from large manufacturers that are used to purposely oppress you and basically almost kill you, you should be not listening to those experts. That's why I don't listen to them when it comes to climate change. That's why I don't listen to them when it comes to food, when it comes to health, when it comes to... This is why you have to watch everything with a grain of salt, because these experts are tied to the worst people imaginable. And a lot of these people are just projecting what they're being told by their overlords to purposely put us through their agenda. The agenda of the top 1%, the global elites that want to objectify humanity and not actually preserve it. Not actually make humanity better for people.